You probably don't even realize how hard you're still trying to control everything, not just your day or your future, but your emotions, your thoughts, your reactions, the way people see you, the way you're allowed to feel, even the timing of your own peace. You want change, of course you do. You want ease, softness, something lighter than this constant mental weight. But if you're honest, you're trying to force the change on your terms. You want to heal, but only if it makes sense. You want clarity, but only if it comes quickly. You want to surrender, but not if it means letting go of your grip on how things are supposed to unfold. And somewhere deep down, you've convinced yourself that if you can just control enough, you'll finally feel safe. You micromanage your healing. You analyze every mood. You turn even your peace into a project. And the worst part is, most people won't even notice. From the outside, it just looks like you're self-aware, responsible, doing the work. But inside, you're tired. Not from life, but from trying to hold life in place. Because every time something moves unexpectedly, you tighten. Every time you feel something unfamiliar, you start calculating. Every time something doesn't go the way you planned, you call it a problem, and then try to fix it. You think you're protecting yourself. But what you're really doing is delaying the very shift you've been waiting for. Because real change, the kind that actually frees you, doesn't happen when you tighten your grip. It happens when you release it. When you stop trying to perfect the moment before you let it happen. When you stop editing your reactions before you even feel them. When you stop making your emotions pass a test before they're allowed to exist. Nothing changes when you're in control. Because control doesn't allow change, it just repeats safety. And at some point, you have to ask, is safety really what I'm after? Or is it just the excuse I use to never surrender? The thing about control is, it feels smart. It feels responsible. It gives you the illusion that you're being careful, thoughtful, intentional. That if you just stay one step ahead, you won't get hurt. You won't fall behind. You won't be caught off guard. But what control never tells you is what it costs you. You start losing your ability to be here, not physically, emotionally. Because when you're always managing, calculating, preparing, you're not living the moment, you're trying to shape it. You're not feeling your emotions, you're watching them from behind glass. You're not responding, you're performing. You build routines, rituals, mental frameworks, not because you love structure, but because structure gives you the feeling that you're doing it right, that you're making progress, that you're becoming more whole, more spiritual, more aligned. But the more you cling to that version of progress, the more disconnected you become from the version of you that's already whole. You start feeling lost, even while doing everything right. You start questioning your own intuition because it doesn't fit your timeline. You start overanalyzing your peace, wondering if it's real, if it's earned, if it's enough. And somewhere in all that over-effort, you stop trusting yourself. Because control doesn't just restrict your outer world, it starts to suffocate your inner one. It whispers things like, don't relax yet, you haven't earned it. Don't feel that, it'll throw you off course. Don't slow down, you might miss something important. But what you're really missing is yourself. You're missing the version of you who exists without needing to constantly adjust, improve, correct. The version of you who moves slower, but with clarity, who doesn't have all the answers, but is finally at peace with that, who doesn't try to control the process because they've learned to trust their place inside of it. And this isn't about giving up structure. This is about remembering that structure was meant to support you, not control you. That discipline was meant to serve your presence, not replace it. That clarity was supposed to feel freeing, not fragile. Because when control becomes your safety, you forget how to feel safe without it. And until you release that grip, nothing truly shifts. It's not because you're failing, it's because you're trying to force a breakthrough in an environment where nothing is allowed to move freely. So what actually happens when you stop trying to control it all? At first, not much. And that's what makes it hard. You expect some kind of instant relief, a breakthrough, a clear sign, a deep exhale. But what you get instead is space. Just space. And that's the part that feels foreign. Because when you've been holding tension for years, emotional, mental, even spiritual, space feels like emptiness. Silence feels like something's wrong. And letting go feels like you're doing nothing. But stay with it. Don't rush to fill the silence. Don't run back to the chaos just because it's familiar. Because if you give it a little time, that space you once feared will start to soften into something else. Clarity. Not the kind you force out of thinking harder. The kind that arrives on its own. Not because you hunted it down, but because you stopped chasing. You start hearing your own thoughts without reacting to them. You stop spinning every emotion into a narrative. You stop assuming that every uncomfortable feeling means something's wrong. You realize that maybe the discomfort isn't a signal to fix. Maybe it's just a sign that something inside you is reorganizing. Not being broken down, just being rearranged into something more honest. And in that honesty, things start to move. Not in big dramatic ways, but in small, subtle shifts that would have gone unnoticed if you were still busy forcing. You sleep deeper. You speak slower. You make decisions without spiraling into doubt. You begin trusting your timing, even when nothing makes sense yet. It's like the pressure finally lets go of you. The moment you stop trying to push it away. Because here's the truth most people miss. Change doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from creating the conditions where change can actually happen. And control is not one of those conditions. Control is a contraction. It tightens, it narrows, it monitors. But growth needs space. Peace needs air. Healing needs trust, not effort. So when you stop gripping, you begin allowing. And what you allow has room to breathe, to rise, to reveal itself without being reshaped every time it shows up. You don't have to force clarity to be wise. You don't have to perform stillness to be present. You don't have to orchestrate change for it to find you. You just have to step aside long enough to let something real move through you. And here's what's most unexpected. When you finally stop trying to control everything, life doesn't fall apart. It starts to meet you, not because you've mastered the art of surrender, but because for the first time, you're not standing in its way. You're not rewriting the moment before it unfolds. You're not calculating every possibility just to stay safe. You're not twisting yourself into someone more digestible. You're just there, and life notices. It begins to offer you things you weren't even asking for. Tiny alignments, quiet ease, people who don't require performance, decisions that feel natural instead of strategic, moments of clarity that rise without force. Not because you figured them out, but because you finally stopped gripping your reality so tightly. And you start to understand something deeper. Control didn't keep you safe. It kept you distracted. It kept you locked in your head, always adjusting, always watching, always trying to get it right. But the moment you drop back into presence, you realize how much you were missing, how much energy went into managing outcomes that never even happened, how many versions of yourself you cycled through just to feel secure, how often you mistook effort for truth. And here's the deeper realization. Life never asked you to be perfect. It asked you to be here, to show up as the version of you who isn't always bracing, to stop performing awareness, to stop chasing growth, to simply exist in the space between knowing and not knowing. Because that space, the one you've been avoiding, is where everything real lives. It's where your peace has been waiting. Not the peace that comes from everything going your way, but the peace that comes from no longer needing it to. It's where your intuition can finally speak, because you're no longer drowning it out with plans and predictions. It's where your life starts to feel like yours again, not because you're in control of it, but because you're finally in relationship with it. And the deeper you go into that space, the less you feel the need to shape every experience. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop trying to manage your emotions before anyone else sees them. You stop needing every moment to be meaningful. And strangely, that's what makes it meaningful, because now you're no longer trying to fix the moment. You're actually living it. And that's something control never gave you. Only presence can. There's a strange kind of freedom that starts to show up when you stop needing to understand everything. You begin to notice how much of your control was never really about managing life. It was about managing your discomfort with not knowing. You thought you were trying to improve things. You thought you were creating stability, but really, you were trying to protect yourself from the unknown, from that vast, quiet space where things don't make sense yet, and maybe won't for a while. And that space used to scare you, because when you're used to analyzing everything, silence feels like danger. When you're used to predicting everything, mystery feels like failure. And when you're used to controlling everything, not knowing feels like you're doing something wrong. But something soft begins to happen when you stop chasing clarity like a finish line. You start learning how to be in between things, not rushing to the next breakthrough, not pressing every moment for meaning, just letting life happen in the middle space, the space that used to feel like limbo, but now feels strangely peaceful. You stop searching for the lesson in every hard feeling. You stop turning every quiet moment into a checklist item. You stop framing your growth like a graph you need to constantly monitor, and you start realizing maybe the peace you're looking for was never behind the next realization. It was behind the need to have one. Because clarity isn't something you find through effort. It's something that meets you when you stop pushing it away with analysis. The less you try to pin everything down, the more truth starts to emerge on its own. Not all at once, not with fireworks, but gently, like light filtering in through a curtain you finally stopped holding closed. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the most important shift you'll ever experience isn't some huge breakthrough or moment of realization. Maybe it's just that quiet, honest second when you stop needing control to feel safe, when you finally let yourself exist in the middle of things, without rushing them forward, and without dragging them back. That's where life begins to breathe again, not because you understood it, but because you let go of the pressure to. The more you stop trying to control everything, the more you realize what it's been blocking you from all along. Connection, not just with peace, not just with clarity, but with people, with presence, with the parts of yourself that have been quietly waiting to be felt, not fixed. Because when you're always trying to manage everything, you're not truly present. You're listening, but you're scanning. You're showing up, but you're filtered. You're speaking, but you're monitoring yourself the entire time, adjusting your tone, checking your face, translating your feelings into something safer. And people can feel that. Even if they don't know how to name it, they feel it. They feel when you're there, but not open, available, but not reachable, alive, but distant. Because control doesn't just close you off from chaos. It closes you off from intimacy. You're so busy managing the moment that you miss it. You miss the pause where something real could have entered. You miss the awkward silence that could have become connection. You miss the raw emotion that could have made you feel seen. And worst of all, you miss yourself. Because control is always thinking ahead. What to say next, what to do next, how to avoid discomfort, how to make it look effortless. But presence doesn't live in next. It lives in now, in the breath you didn't rush, in the eye contact you didn't break, in the part of you that didn't need to be polished before being shared. And here's the hardest part to admit. When you're always trying to control how you're perceived, you don't actually let yourself be loved, because you're not showing people who you are. You're showing them who you think is easiest to accept, but the version of you that's easiest to accept is usually the version that feels most disconnected from your actual heart. And at some point, you realize you can't truly feel loved if you're not truly being you. You can't feel understood if you're constantly editing yourself. You can't feel connected if your walls never come down. But the walls aren't there because you don't care. They're there because somewhere along the line, you learned that control felt safer than closeness. That being seen was a risk. That openness was a threat. That trust had to be earned, not allowed. But connection doesn't require perfection. It requires your presence. And your presence doesn't need to be fixed before it's shared. It just needs to be real. The longer you live without controlling everything, the more you notice how many small moments used to be built on tension. You pour your coffee slower, not because you're trying to be mindful, but because there's no internal clock yelling at you to hurry. You pause before speaking, not out of fear, but because silence finally feels like part of the conversation. You don't apologize for needing rest. You don't explain your quiet moods. You stop turning every passing emotion into a productivity report. And you start realizing just how much of your old life was a response to pressure. Not real pressure, imagined pressure. The kind that whispered, "You're falling behind. You should be more healed by now. You need to do something with this feeling before it ruins everything." But now, you're learning to let feelings come and go without setting off an alarm every time they show up. You don't spiral when you feel unclear. You just feel unclear. You don't panic when things slow down. You trust that something's still happening beneath the surface. And maybe the biggest shift, you stop needing to prove anything, even to yourself. You're not trying to become the best version of you anymore. You're just allowing the real version of you to come forward, bit by bit, moment by moment, without pressure. And it doesn't always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels awkward, exposed, anticlimactic, because the world teaches you to chase intensity. But peace often arrives as an absence. The absence of noise, urgency, gripping, comparison. At first, it almost feels boring. But then, slowly, it starts to feel like truth. A kind of truth that doesn't need to be dramatic to be deeply alive. And once you've lived in that state long enough, you start to wonder how you ever lived without it. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, because it's yours, and because it doesn't require control to stay. So if this opens something in you, even quietly, leave a comment with the word space. Let that be your reminder that you don't have to keep holding it all together. And if you want more of this, more calm, more clarity, more truth, subscribe. I'll meet you here again soon. No pressure, no fixing, just presence.